Hey, it's Real Talk with the Pimpcron, and today we are going to shoot a volley across your bow. That's right. We're asking the question, are fluff players just hipsters in 40k and Age of Sigmar? I don't know. Let's dive into it. If you've read any of my articles, or read my Epic War Planner, or just listened to the podcast in general, you'll know that I'm one of the least competitive players. Like, I like the tactics, but the list building doesn't interest me so much. I'd much rather just throw stuff on the board and then try to make it work the best I can. And or like, oh, I just painted this unit, I'm playing them today, or whatever. I'm not a real competitive person. But I'm also not really a fluff person either. I think the fluff is neat, like the backstory and the lore and all that, but I don't commit it to memory. I'm even more centered on tactics and non-competitive list building. But even I noticed that it is a very slippery slope for a casual player like myself to turn into a hipster. Like it's very, very easy, and sometimes I feel like I am just being contrarian and just being hipsterish. Now, how is that, you say? Well, go grab your mocha frappuccino and put on your horn glasses and go listen to this somewhere in a coffee shop because you're probably at risk of being a hipster. Let's talk about casual players and how we see it differently. Us casual players see the game in an entirely different way than competitive players. I just had a conversation with a friend at the store about an army. My half of the conversation was, wow, these models are beautiful. These models have so much style. They make me want to play them. His half of the conversation was, yeah, they're really powerful. Yes, they have very good rules. My friend James is also a casual player like myself, and had a similar conversation with someone when Idoneth Deepkin came out a couple years ago, and James was like, "Oh, the Idoneth Deepkin have such awesome models. I'm going to start this army." And our mutual friend replied, "I'm not sure if I'll start the army until they release the rules for them. If they're good, I might play them." Now, I get it. James gets it too. The rules are important, and you probably don't want to play a total garbage army, right? I understand that sometimes like Curl Boys come out and they're just not very good compared to everything else. And then it's harder to have fun with it because you're very underpowered, you're underwhelmed, all that. Um and this is an expensive hobby, and the models are not cheap, getting more expensive by the day. But having said that, will you only play models that are competitive? That is very opposite to my personal way of thinking. I want my army to look cool and feel cool with neat backstory and neat models. And yes, of course, I would like my army's rules to be at least average. But I have played Tyranids all through 6th edition and 7th edition. So I think that says a lot about how much I care if an army is competitive, because Tyranids were like notoriously bottom of the barrel in 6th and 7th edition. They were just awful. They got a big bump in 8th, but I think that shows you another indicator is that I've owned 40 metal flayed ones since 5th edition. And if you know anything about Necrons, if you know anything about flayed ones have been awful until, I mean, they're decent now. I don't think they're incredibly good, but they're decent in 9th edition. But here's the problem, getting back to the point. There's a social thing that happens, I forget what it's called, when a person is submerged in a different culture. Oftentimes, the person that is an outsider will find that their accent and mannerisms either change to fit the community they're in now, or sometimes their accent and mannerisms actually become more extremely different. It's like we unconsciously entrench ourselves in our native ways when we're confronted with the threat of another culture stripping us of our own. There are many examples of this. It also works with like religion, politics, etc. People will often go along with something they don't personally believe just because the side that they support thinks that way, if that makes any sense. They overlook those things simply because, well, not siding with their team means that they're technically siding against their team, is the way they see that. There is an island near us. I believe it's Tangier Island, and it's in the Chesapeake Bay. And their dialect, it's a literal island. You have to take a boat to get to it and all of that. And they're pretty cut off from everyone else. Obviously, they have commerce, etc. But it's like a fishing village, and it has been since like the 1700s or 1600s. And they still have a very like British accent, which is funny because they've been like very insular for all these years. And what's funny is they did like studies on them, and their British accent has actually become more stronger. That's not a phrase. It's become stronger over the decades as they've integrated more with regular America. So the rest of us sound more or less like I do. And then these guys over here are sounding like extremely British. And it's just kind of funny because it's something in us that doesn't want to lose our culture or lose who we are. So a lot of times it actually becomes more extreme. So getting back to the point, when casuals get around competitives, it's very easy to start taking the game less and less seriously from this weird thing that we do mentally to like retain our independence or whatever. While a competitive starts yammering to you about net lists and the new hotness, you start galvanizing yourself against that subconsciously, right? So the competitive's like,
Yeah, this new unit is really good. They do X, Y, or Z when within 6 inches of another unit.
and then you're like, I'm not really interested in that. I like the models regardless.
Sure, but I heard that this really neat thing they can do, it's really nasty. It's really nasty on the board.
I'm so casual that I don't care if they even have rules or not. I'd play them without rules.
Yeah, I heard this army has some really good weapon options too.
Weapon options, who cares about that? I'd play them even without models. Just cut out squares of paper and write the names on them. That's how casual I am.
And this army gets its own terrain. It gives them X, Y, or Z buff.
Who needs terrain or even a board? I don't use any of that. I just sit alone and I imagine the game being played in my head. You know, being casual and all.
Yeah, I like to think of lists and strategize too.
Well, I'm so casual that I don't even play. Casual over here.
Yeah, I get it. Sometimes just hanging out with your bros in the game store is enough to have a fun time.
And the casual player just leaves, just walks out the door and never returns. It's like in our distaste for competitive play, you got to make sure that you don't let yourself turn into a casual 40k hipster. That's basically what I'm saying. There's really no pride to be had in not taking the game seriously. You know, you probably should still take the game seriously. But then again, those competitives, right? Screw those guys. The competitive nature of some players make the rest of us kind of like suspicious of everybody, right? Because how many times have you as a casual player, if you are one, have been like, "Oh, I just want a fun game. Oh, I just want a casual fun game." And the other guy's like, "Oh yeah, I love fun games." And then he stomps you with 17 Archaons. Like, how many times that happened? That's happened a lot of times in your life, probably. Where your definition of fun, and I covered this weeks ago or months ago in the podcast, your definition of fun can be very, very different. So the minute someone starts talking about like, oh, these rules are really good, you start eyeing them up, like, are you a tryhard? And of course, I do have to make a distinction between competitive players and actual like asshole tryhards. There is a difference. Competitive players enjoy the list building. Competitive players enjoy trying to make a synergistic list, and they also appreciate the tactics and things like that. So competitive is not. I know it has a bad connotation sometimes, but it shouldn't because competitive players are not necessarily mean or jerks or whatever. Really, what we're talking about is the tryhards that make the community suspicious of everybody. Because a regular old competitive player, if they have the social wherewithal and you're like, hey, I don't want to play a competitive game, they can typically tone it down and go, oh, okay, I won't bring all my, I won't bring a tournament list or anything like that. I'll just throw something together. But then when you have the tryhards, like the guy that stomped the 11-year-old the other week at the game club, they're just not socially aware enough. And I still don't think that guy's a bad guy either. I don't think they're bad people. I just don't think they pick up on the social cues. So every time you talk to somebody in this hobby and they start going on and on about the rules, you start going, is this person a tryhard? If you don't know them, if it's a new person you're meeting. Just like James saying, oh, I like the rules. And he's like, I like the models. And the guy's like, oh yeah, the rules are really good. Well, that's kind of like, that's kind of a red flag for a lot of casual players, but it's very, very easy to just entrench yourself so that no matter what they say, you don't agree with them. And it does end up coming off very hipsterish. I find that myself sometimes, where I will buy a model because I like the rules, right? And someone's like, "Oh, that model, has really good rules." And I'm like, "Well, I bought it, I didn't even care about the rules. I don't know what the rules are." But then I will be disappointed if you play the game and the rules for that unit just totally blow. You can't do anything, you can't accomplish anything with them. They're way overcosted. They don't have a role on the battlefield. So it's like you got to find like a happy medium. You don't want to be so galvanized against the tryhards that you become a hipster. But on the other hand, you also don't want to become a tryhard yourself and it's only the rules you care about, you know? I guess part of what I'm saying here is that there's so many different definitions for things, whether it be for fun, the word fun is so subjective. The word casual or fluff or competitive or tryhard or all of those have so many different connotations to so many different people that it makes it very hard to actually identify what this person is, you know? We need like some sort of lawful good. Oh my god, I need to make an allied matrix. No, not allied matrix. A alignment matrix of the different types of players. Yes, just like D&D, like good, neutral, evil, and then lawful, chaotic, and neutral. I definitely need to do that. So, I'll start working on that. Anyway, thank you to GameAt.eu for supporting the show and panhandle3d.etsy.com. And you can get the discount codes in the show notes there. And of course, my beautiful, sexy, good smelling Patreon patrons. I appreciate all of you. I love you. I'll see you next week.